Hello and welcome to the Life After Diets podcast. I'm Sarah Dosanjh, psychotherapist and author of the book, I Can't Stop Eating.
And I'm Stefanie Michele, binge recovery health coach. If you feel out of control around food, we get it because we've been there.
Thank you for joining our conversations about how to make peace with food and feel more comfortable in our bodies.
Now on to this week's episode.
Before we begin, we just want to let you know that we are going to be doing more live events on Zoom where we can connect together as a community. At the time of recording, our next live event is going to be on the 30th of January 2022. If you would like to join us, please check out the link in the show notes. Hi, Steph.
Hi, Sarah.
I just want to thank you for letting me change the subject of today's episode at the very last minute. I love how flexible you are.
Oh, yeah. Anytime, man.
Gosh, you're so chill. I wish I was as chill as you, Steph.
I'm not.
Okay, well, that's staying in.
We're trying to be chill. Okay, go right. Go ahead, Sarah. Yes,
okay.
It's fine to change topics. It keeps me on my toes.
Mm-hmm. And to just give the listeners a little bit of context, I messaged Steph. Well, I messaged Steph this morning, but you would have still been asleep. And because it's morning for you, you've had like a couple of hours notice for this change of topic. But I really wanted to talk about what it's like to see yourself in photographs and the challenges that come around that. And the reason why I wanted to change this was because I had a really strong experience of this at the weekend, which left me reeling. So I thought, instead of taking it to therapy, I'm going to come and speak about it on the podcast.
And I actually, it's one of, I would have been happy to talk about whatever you wanted to talk about, but I really do like this topic. I'm happy to dive in here. And I'm also curious to hear what happened and how your weekend was. Like, tell me.
Well, as you know, and as some people might have seen on Instagram, although this is going to be a couple of weeks later by the time this podcast comes out, at the weekend, I went and spoke in front of 300 people at a nutrition conference. And I was talking about binge eating to people in the fitness industry. So it's a bit nerve-wracking to do something like that. It's the first live event I've done that's been that big. But I was looking forward to it, and I'd got this dress and I loved it. I thought, I feel great in this dress, and this is what I want to wear when I give my talk on stage. And in the morning, I put the dress on, I look in the mirror, and I'm like, yes, I like this. I like what I've got on. And when I got on stage, those 90 minutes that I spent on stage felt really good, because I know it's quite nerve-wracking to speak in front of an audience, but this was me getting to talk about the thing that I love talking about more than anything else in the world, which is about binge eating, and people actually wanting to listen to what I had to say. So that for me was an incredible experience. So when I was stood on that stage, I felt really centered. I felt really embodied. It was just a really great experience. I know the talk went well. Well, it went how I wanted it to go, but it was a very vulnerable experience too, because I shared my story. And I don't know if you find this, Steph, but sometimes when you're trying to share your story in 15 minutes and you're trying to tell it in a chronological way that makes sense to people, it can be just quite a tricky thing to do. So I hadn't planned it. And throughout the talk, I peppered it with my own experiences. And I felt like I laid my heart and soul bare on that stage. And I felt great. Okay. But the minute I stepped off that stage and I walked back to my table, my whole body just wanted to crumple into a ball. I just wanted to hide. You know that term, vulnerability hangover?
Yeah.
That's basically what I got straight away. And I'd been really poorly as well. And I'd been trying to stave it off. And the minute I got off stage, my cough came back, my headache hit, and I didn't feel well either. And I just felt so uncomfortable in my own skin and just super self-conscious. And then, of course, people started tagging me in their stories on Instagram. And my friend was there and she took a lot of photos. And the first thing that happened when I saw a photograph of myself on that stage was it was a visceral reaction before I even had a thought about it. And I felt sick. It was right in the pit of my stomach. I saw myself and I thought, that is not what I saw
Yeah.
in the mirror that morning, yet that was what I was seeing when I looked at the photograph. And then all the thoughts came in, all the judgments about my body and about, and heightened, I think, by being in a room with fitness professionals, right? You know, people who, it's all about making your body often look a certain way. It can also be about functionality as well. I don't want to paint everybody with the same brush, and that might be some of my projections as well. And then I've got this line of people wanting to come and speak to me, and I'm feeling like I just don't want to face anybody. There was something that came up for me about, now these 300 people know my story. And that sounds strange because I talk about my story and I share lots of things on the podcast, and I often forget that people hear it.
Yeah, well, it's easy.
Exactly.
It's easy to compartmentalize.
Exactly. I'm just telling you, Steph, and if people want to have a listen to this, they're more than welcome to. Like,
exactly.
All power to them. But there was something about everybody's eyes on me when I got off that stage, and I thought, they know. And then I saw the photo and I thought, I couldn't marry the two up. There was part of me that saw what was happening. Just a small part that was like, okay, there's a whole load of stuff being provoked here about what it was that I saw when I saw that photograph, or quite a few of the photographs. Rather than figure out whether it was true or not, I had to kind of let it be. And it probably took a couple of days for me to come back to myself after that. And it reminded me, one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about it on the podcast is because this is something that I hear a lot from people. And particularly when you're doing the body acceptance work, and I'm actually feeling a bit more accepting of my body. And maybe you're feeling more balanced with food as well. And like, this feels okay. I can be comfortable in this body. And then you catch sight of a photo, or then you catch sight of your reflection. And it's a surprise. And I remember that feeling. I remember I used to get that a lot. And I haven't had it for a long time.
Yeah.
And it was probably quite humbling to know that I could be so affected by that. And the stark difference between the two things, what I saw in the mirror and what I saw in the photograph, and neither one being objectively true, but being about what I saw. So I wanted to share this with people because I thought maybe they might relate, and I'm interested in your thoughts and whether you can relate.
You know what's funny? I saw you tag yourself. Like, I saw it in your stories on Saturday. It was Saturday, right? I was standing in my garage, I was shutting my garage door, and I had my phone in my hand, and I saw that you'd posted it, and I was like, woo, because I was like, oh, she's done her talk, and I was excited. And there was a moment in my mind where I was like, I actually thought this, because you're on a stage, and to see yourself taken from that far, it's like that whole, like, you're just out there. I didn't know you're having vulnerability, but I saw that you had posted it yourself, and I was wondering, I was like, I wonder how she feels about her own photographs, because it is a thing. Like, and I think that more than anything else, the mirror and photographs, especially when it's caught off guard, like when you see something that you're not expecting to see, it's different, I think, even than being in the dressing room and trying something on where you're like stepping in front of it to look at yourself on purpose. There's something else that happens when you catch it by accident, or when someone takes it of you, puts it in their stories, and then, but the fact that you had put it up, I was like, oh, like, it just spoke to me of your body image, and it was just like, okay, like, she put a photo of herself on a stage on her stories, and we haven't talked about maybe that personally between us, I guess. So it crossed my mind. So it's interesting that this is like that you were, and I guess above all, I'm wondering, like, what did you see? Like, what meaning did you make of the picture?
I think there was a couple of things. One, I think when you stand in front of the mirror, for me anyway, I tend to stand up a bit straighter. You stand in a certain way. And I think on that stage, I had felt so expansive, so in my body. And what I saw was someone kind of hunched over a bit. And I thought that wasn't what I was feeling. That wasn't what I thought my body was doing. So there was a disconnect for me there. And I won't necessarily share all the exact words that came to mind about my body, but it was about it being too heavy, and about this dress that I thought was cut a certain way, and then suddenly feeling like it made me look, I want to say frumpy. It's such a old-fashioned word, but I think that was one of the words that came to mind, along with a few other things about my body as well. And I remember when I reshared, I remember looking at the photos going like, oh, I don't know if I want to reshare that. And going, no, you cannot let, because of how you feel about your body in this moment, because I knew it was in this moment, affect you being willing to reshare it. If that had been the reason for not sharing something, that just would not have sat well with what my values ultimately, and what the values that I choose for myself, beyond sometimes the struggles that might come up around body image.
Okay, that makes sense. So almost like the disturbance, in part at least, was about the incongruence of what you believe yourself to be projecting or embodying and the experience of self compared to what a picture may portray or what you imagine that it portrays, and that there's a difference. And I always go back to that feeling like you're being misunderstood. And I'm wondering what your personal experience with being, is that a thing for you, of being misunderstood? Or I'm trying to think of a better word, maybe like that someone's going to see something that isn't true about you, or like that you felt expansive and embodied and good on stage, and that the projection was that you were crouched and frumpy and whatever words that also associates with, but that the image that people were getting of you did not match who you are or what you felt like in that moment. And is it something in there? Is there something about that distinction?
I don't know if I thought that, because I don't know that I necessarily thought that other people were seeing what I was seeing either. I don't know, because I was so confused about what was true. In the morning, I'm excited, I'm nervous, that I'm in this heightened state. And I look at myself in the mirror, this is what I see. And then later on, when I came off stage, I already felt so uncomfortable in my own skin before I even looked at the picture. So I don't know if I can believe my mind. I was more in a state of dissonance than, oh, this definitely means this. I was just thrown, absolutely thrown by the experience, and by the fact, like, it was like my body reacted before my mind could even know, before my mind even had any thoughts that I was aware of.
I talked about this in my group the other day. I have this, like, I mean, I wish we could have a neuroscientist confirm, but I feel like there's something about visual feedback that bypasses thought. It's like it taps right into your emotional state. And it makes sense from a sensory point of view. Because I think, I also think it speaks to the fact that you can make peace with your body intellectually. And I have clients who will come to me saying, I have done so much work intellectually on this. I know my worth is not my weight. I know that society does this. I know these things. And yet when I see myself, it doesn't matter. Like it all falls apart. And it's like it taps into something emotional over intellectual. And I think that's what the visual feedback does as well with photos. I think there's something about sensory input that changes into, it just goes right by the intellect. And so when we react in that visceral way, it's because it's tapping into something emotional versus something intellectual. And I think that using intellectual like interjecting the intellectual on top of that is the way that I anyway experience myself working my way back from that kind of experience. I need to add the intellectual layer to make this an entire brain process rather than just a strictly emotional experience. And I used to think that that was like talking myself out of something true. Actually, I used to perceive that as like, oh, well, when I add those intellectual layers, I'm just trying to like convince myself that it's not, that what I see isn't true. And it's like, no, actually, it's just giving a fuller picture, because your brain is not purely emotional. And the projections of what is happening when you see something visually in your emotional state, those are emotional projections too, that other people are not privy to. So I think it's a more accurate way of looking at a photo as a whole, or looking at a reflection as a whole, is to incorporate both sides of the brain on that. Let them both have a say. But I think that initial visceral reaction is the emotional side that is largely influenced by your emotions at the time, and or your emotional opinions of yourself and what you're seeing. So I'm imagining almost that if you know that when you feel a certain way, like maybe like hunched shoulders for you or something, I wouldn't have ever noticed that. It's not something I saw in the picture. Like I'm like, oh, okay. But you saw that, and there must be something about you and your intimacy with yourself of knowing when I see myself hunched shoulders because I know myself so well. And I see that there. And that means to me this, like, that means to me that sometimes when I do that, I'm insecure. I don't know like what your hunched shoulders mean to you. And you kind of looked at that and was like, that betrays my discomfort at the time, or the vulnerability that you were actually feeling that only you would have perceived. Nobody else would have necessarily seen it that way. I didn't. But that you were emotionally tapping into that experience, whereas no one else would be doing that. And what you were perceiving was your own emotional state at the time, which admittedly was not feeling great.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. One thing I tell myself as well with photos and with the work I do with clients as well is a photo, a still image of someone, doesn't really convey what you experience of someone in 3D, what you experience in terms of not just mannerisms, but all the dimensions. So that, and being able to tell myself, I know I cannot see myself with any level of objectivity. I know that. And even now, I'm talking about hunched shoulders. I don't even know if my shoulders were hunched. I almost feel like I want to go back and have another look. And I think I do.
Bias.
Yeah, I think I do need to go back and look at these pictures again, because I haven't looked again, because I want to be ready and kind of getting ahead of it, as we've talked before, because when it catches you by surprise, and my resilience and my resources were so low because I was exhausted, I wasn't well. I was in this heightened state from doing this big thing in a room with lots of people. What I know is the energy of being on stage and how connected I felt to the audience. That to me is still my experience. So that's still real for me. That wasn't taken away from me. But it did mean that afterwards I just struggled to connect with people in the way I really would have liked to have connected with people. And I was disappointed about that.
Were you projecting that they were seeing something in you at that point? Like, did seeing the photograph convey, oh, they can now see my whatever, like they can see this about me now, and that's why the connection was harder?
I don't think it was about that. I don't think I was even thinking much about what was going on for other people. I was just so conscious of wanting to hide.
Okay.
And just not wanting to be seen, and feeling so in my own head. That's what makes connection difficult, and that's what, like, anxiety can do as well. If you get really anxious in your head, it's really difficult to focus on the person in front of you. And I think that's a little bit how I felt afterwards.
Do you think that was solely due to the picture? Do you think that if you hadn't seen the picture, it would have been different?
No, I'm not sure that would have necessarily been the case. Maybe a bit less. The following day, when I was absolutely exhausted, I had the same thoughts going, what made you ever think that your body was acceptable? Those thoughts came back. I do not have the energy to undo this at the moment, but I can say I'm not making any decisions about anything until I've rested and until I feel better, until I've got my resources back. But I felt that going around, and I noticed it, and I allowed it, and it was still a really unpleasant experience. I don't think that made it much easier, but I wasn't completely believing it, but I was 70% believing it, I think, the following day. And it kind of faded as the days went on from there.
Well, what's different in this moment than it was then? What has changed in the time elapsed?
That's a really good point. I do feel like I've rested. Today is actually, yesterday and today, the first days that I've actually started to feel a bit well again. And once my energy is returned, I feel like my mind has kind of gone like, yeah, it's Sarah, it's fine. Like, your body's absolutely fine. Like, it's okay. And it's okay that it wasn't fine for you for a bit, because there was part of me as well that wanted to go into, Sarah, you do this work. How on earth could you be so affected by a photograph? You should be beyond that by now.
I think the work is what you did. And I say this all the time. I don't think and I say this about binge eating too, like having the episode of what will be deemed as the failure or the regression isn't the point. It's what you do with it. And it's like the fact that you were able to take a step away from the experience. You were in the emotional pit, but had a recognition of this moment cannot be trusted in full. I need to put it on the shelf until I get my whole brain back.
Uh-huh.
And being ill, I think probably made that even definitely being tired or being sick makes it more, it's harder to access rational thought. It's just like, I just think it brings on your emotional side more. I'm sure that there's science for that. I don't know it. And I want to disclaim that I don't know that. I just think it. But I think that that is so much of it. For me, it has been. It's been not a case of I never deal with bad body image. It's like I just know that my visceral reactions are not the whole story, and I'm willing to wait that out. And I think I never really can access, well, that isn't true. I'll tell a story, but um it used to for sure be that I would have that visceral the flooding of the emotion, and I just would be like, I used to buy in to that, and then I would spiral forever, for months potentially. And now I'm like, "Oh, there it is. There's my spiral. I'm spiraling." I know there's a different perspective to be had here. I know that. And just the knowing that and being like, I'm going to patiently wait for that now. And then allowing that to happen, instead of buying in. And that to me is how my body image work exists. Like it's really just a practice of being like, I don't trust my emotional reaction because I'm projecting so much. It's my emotional reaction. I've written about this in my weekly email, but I'll say it again. Or maybe I talked about it. Did I talk about when I got my photos done for my website?
No, no, I haven't
Okay, I
heard.
wrote
And
about it
obviously,
then. I
yeah,
can't
no.
remember what I put where. I'm like, was it a closet coaching or anyway? So I recently had photos done for my website because previously it was when my daughter had like my headshot that I used to have on Instagram and on my website was a photo my daughter had snapped of me. So I was like, I think I'll go get them, make them official. So I went and I had these photos done and lots of full length shots and lots of shots in like weird positions I would never have chosen. And, like they're like, put your hand here. And I'm like, okay. Anyway, so this in an email one, at this point, it's been a month or so. The photographer emailed me and said, "Here's your gallery, and here's this button." And I knew that when I hit the button, it was like, see myself only full length all over the place. And I hesitated because I was like, I know what photographs can do. And I also do want to spend time talking about the two-dimensional aspect of that and some of that, photos not being facts. Anyway, knowing that though, intellectually, I know that intellectually, but I know that when I click the button, I'm going to bypass that part and I'm just going to have emotions. So I guess going into that was helpful to know that I was going to do that. And I clicked the button and there I was, and some of them, so I think initially the ones I saw were the full length. Yeah, they were the first ones up and it was just like me right there in jeans, like in a sweater and jeans and like all of me. And I immediately, there's just like a part of my body, that I've always been critical of. Like that was always the area of like, and it was the first thing I saw. And it was almost like, and I had that like, like there I am and there is me and it's big, and then I didn't have access to the like, okay, but big, so what? Like I didn't have that part. It was just like the emotional like thing. And I also saw it as like, I don't think big inherently is the bad. That's not what we're scared of. I think it's like what that means. It's like what you have made it mean about yourself. Like to me, it always used to be like, that's the part of me that's out of control. That's the part of me that doesn't have willpower. That's the part of me that doesn't fit in. That's, it's all of these actual insecurities I have that I project onto that part of my body. And they all came up in that moment. And I had this state of being where I wasn't present. I just like felt myself leave. Like I was just like, oh God, oh God. Um, and I don't know, but usually that is where I would abandon. I'd be like, forget it. I'm just, who do I think I am? This whole thing. And I didn't do that. I did it for like like there was a temptation to do that. But something in the intellectual side of my brain that I have, I guess, trained a while was able to be like, no, no, no. Like this is not the truth. Like it is not all of you. This is a moment you're having. And I think knowing that was everything because it was like, okay, then hold on. Hold on. Don't leave yet. Don't. And literally within, I would say, less than a minute, I was able to, and this is the first time I've ever done this with a photograph of myself. Um, I was able to look at the photo as a whole rather than as a zoomed in part of this part of my body. I was like, I suddenly saw it because my kids were around and my daughter was behind me and she was like, Mommy, you look so nice. Like, she loved it. She thought it was like the coolest thing that I was like looking because I usually have a bun and yoga pants on like all day long. And she's like, you look so nice. I'm like, yeah. Okay. So anyway, I looked at it like the way she must have seen it as this whole thing, like as a picture of me in a room with this lighting and like in this pink sweater. And the picture itself looked, I don't know, it felt like me. There was something about it that did feel like me. And I saw it. And I saw it. And then I'm like, oh, and I literally can look at the same picture now and I can flip back and forth between the emotional image and be like looking at this part. And then I can go back and see like the whole thing. But it was the first time I ever did that in action, like in the moment. And in that moment, I could see the difference between my emotional projection onto that image and the actual image. And to me, that was one of the most liberating things because looking at a photo of myself has always been like the really harder than a mirror because there's nothing I could do about it. It's like in there and I can't change it and I can't move and I can't like look at a different angle. It's just like, it's just there and that's all you get. um, and so this was the first time that I was able to do that differently. And to me, that's what all of the work I've done has like come into that moment because that was such a slower process before if it happened at all. And it's quicker now. And I just felt on a really physical level the difference between, I almost think it is the difference between flipping from that one side of looking at something emotionally to being able to see it with your whole head, your whole brain and all of the parts of your brain that are involved in your experience.
And what I hear is you getting out ahead of it as well, anticipating. I'm watching for this feeling because I know it's going to come. When I did the BBC Breakfast segment, I was exactly in that position. I was like, okay, I'm going to see myself on TV, on camera here. And I think that might be quite difficult, might not like how I look, and I brace myself. And when I came up, because at one point, they did like a proper zoom in, which was literally like eyebrow to chin on my face. I could just imagine it playing in like an airport or something, and my face being 40 foot high or something. That's where my mind went to. And I went to, oh my goodness. But I just watched it. I was like, it's okay. It doesn't matter. You don't like that. You don't like, it doesn't matter. And when my resources are there and when I'm looking for it, it really is okay. It doesn't feel comfortable, of course, but that comes around to this idea of body image flexibility. Have you heard of that term?
Mm-hmm.
To be able to tolerate. I think there's this idea that we're supposed to arrive at this place. It's why I wanted to do this episode, so that you and I could share this. So I think people might be projecting and assuming that you and I feel amazing in our bodies because of all the work we've done. We never have a bad body image day. But I was definitely expecting it then. And I did have the initial like, and it's absolutely fine. It doesn't matter if I don't like what I see.
Right.
It doesn't, I know what I'm making it mean, and it's not going to mean anything close to that to anybody else.
Yeah. Yes. And I think I did used to think it mattered. Like it really did how I looked was the very most important thing.
That's different. The how I looked and whether I liked how I looked in a particular situation, I would say that there's a nuance between sort of that overall experience moment by moment and knowing that when you see yourself in a particular situation on a camera, that I think it's okay for me not to like myself in a photo or on camera, because why is it okay? I'm pretty sure it is. Like, it's okay because
Why? Because it's not a fact? Like, is it still conditional though?
I think it's okay because I think most of the time I feel okay. It's just in that particular setting. I know that what I see changes.
Yeah.
I know that. So the changes, it's not about I don't care what I look like on camera, because I just don't care what I look like anymore, because I'm so chill as you were about changing the episode subject.
We're just chill people. No,
It's not because of that. I think it's because I separate that image of me that exists on a camera, that exists in a piece of film or whatever, to the image of me that goes through life, that people see, that interacts with people, that connects with people.
You see them as different.
Yes, that's not me.
Which one's not you?
The one on the film.
Why isn't it you?
Because it's just an image of me, and I know I can't see it accurately.
Okay.
And I know that I'm only seeing it through I'm seeing it through an emotional lens, because I'm attached to that image, because that, is a reflection of me. Whereas anybody else watching that is not going to be, I think the emotional state that we're in when we see something has a big impact on what we see. Hence how I felt compared to in the morning, compared to later on as well.
Yeah.
We hope you're enjoying this episode. If you want to connect with the show, we are Life After Diets podcast on YouTube and on Instagram. And if you want to email us, we are lifeafterdietspodcast@gmail.com. If you want to connect with me, Sarah, and find out more about my work and what I offer, I am the Binge Eating Therapist on YouTube and Instagram, and my website is also thebingeeatingtherapist.com.
And if you'd like to learn more about working one-to-one or in groups with me, Stefanie, you can find me at I am Stefanie Michele on Instagram and IamStefaniemichele.com. Now back to the episode.
And I think one of the reasons why I felt as uncomfortable as I did after the talk, even before, was because I went from being on stage, feeling very connected, to stepping off stage. And for some reason, that connection vanished when I stepped off stage. And I still haven't quite been able to make sense of what that was. I suddenly felt disconnected from everybody. That's the vulnerability part, I think, where I suddenly felt really exposed and put myself out there, and now people were going to have their responses and I might have to hear them. I think that was a big part of it as well. That then completely transformed even how I experienced the size of my body, even before I saw that photograph. I tell you what it is, actually, let me rephrase it. It's not that I don't care about that, what I see or how I feel. I just don't believe it in the same way. I know I can't trust myself to know. I can't see myself accurately. So I'm gonna choose to be more generous about myself.
Yeah, well, they're different, not caring and not believing. Because what if it were true? What if
what was true?
What if the image you had? Are you saying that I don't believe the image is an accurate depiction of me, or is it? Because what if it was?
If the image was but the image has to be perceived to exist. Oh, if a tree falls in a forest, does it make a sound?
I think this. No, I think. I mean, I was asking you in a devil's advocate way, but I think what you're saying is right on.
I know what you mean. Like, so if other people were looking and everybody else was having the same thoughts and beliefs as me, because there's all the different perceptions, I don't know, it still doesn't bother me as much. I don't have an emotional response to that. I think it's the only thing I can say. I kind of look at that and go, yeah, that would be an interesting exercise. I think what I do feel when it comes to other people's perceptions, I think one of my vulnerability points is I have an insecurity that I might be a disappointment in person. People, they follow your stuff and they're like, you get me, this, like all this kind of stuff, all that lovely stuff that people project onto you as well. That I think there might have been something floating around about that for me.
Yeah. Agree. Even with my picture, when I had that picture, it was the first full length I had, and I used, I mean, of course, the headshot ones don't matter to me so much, but I used the full length one in some of my content. And the first time I put it out there, I had the thought of, I mean, even though I was like, yeah, I made peace with it. Me, it was like, that is me. It is me. I'm like, but there's people who want me to be thinner. You know, there's people who see me probably in their heads as thinner. There might be people who see me who want me to be bigger. I think all of that. I mean, when you're in social media, I think all of it's true.
Yeah.
Because I get criticism both ways. But it's basically comes down to being like, what if I'm not what they want me to be?
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
what if I'm not what they need me to be?
Mm-hmm.
Does that take away what our connection is? I
Mm-hmm.
think about this too. I have relationships with people, clients, and followers who we've talked for years at this point, and we have a relationship but we've never met. And I feel like, what if they see me, like there's something about, yeah, this is a hard one to really get into. But when I put the picture up, I did it with some amount of vulnerability and some amount of knowing that might be true, that there might be people who see it who are like, oh, I think of her differently now.
Mm-hmm.
And that was disappointing to me. And I feel that still, but I put it up anyway. And I kind of now want to put it up even more to be like, this is me, and whatever meaning you make of that, it's not mine.
Yeah.
And when I get my head around that, I feel on the ground versus in that way of like, oh no, I feel like, yeah. And then I feel, okay, well, then I'm free now. Like, okay. Like I can, all right, here we are then. Who's here? Who's still here?
Yeah.
There's something about that.
Yeah. I really hear you on the whole, people that might prefer you to, or be expecting or wanting you to be bigger, or expecting or wanting you to be smaller. One thing I told myself, I kept saying to myself beforehand leading up to the talk, it's a bit of a grandiose comparison, you'll have to excuse me. But when Brené Brown when she gave her infamous TED talk that went viral and was really well received. I've heard her talk about it in one of her books, and she got a lot of hate. She got a lot of people telling her that she needed to lose weight and really tearing into her appearance. I remember thinking like, okay, well, if Brené Brown, who I think is incredible, has people saying that and can survive it, it's okay. So my motto now is even Brené Brown has her haters.
Yeah.
And that helps me to stop thinking I need to try and be everything for everyone, because I think that's what it comes down to. I'm trying to resonate with everybody. One thing I do want to touch on is that I'm conscious that somebody might, I don't know, see one of these photos of me and think, well, if she thought her body was bigger and my body's bigger than that, then what does that mean about me? I think the point or the idea that I'm trying to share, it was around the dissonance and how different my body looked to me in a couple of hours. That was the bit that threw me, because it made me think, I don't know what's true. Had I seen the same thing in the mirror and in the photos, whatever the size of my body had been, that it wouldn't have been that shock moment. I would have accepted that. I would have made my peace with that. And I felt like I wanted to loop back around and mention that, because it's not bigger body is bad, because that is like absolutely beyond everything that I believe.
Well, if bodies didn't have a value system, would it matter that there was a dissonance? Like there's something that we use our bodies for to like navigate the world, or like to see what makes sense. And it's like, if my body looks like this and I thought it looked like this, the difference is what's uncomfortable. The fact that I wasn't perceiving something that, like, what else am I getting wrong? Like, what else am I not seeing accurately? And we just happen to give our body so much of that. We don't just happen to. It's that's intentional. I mean, like, our bodies are the thing that we like put all this value on. So it's because, I mean, would that be true if your hair color was different, a little different? Maybe you'd be like, what? I don't know. You know what I'm saying though?
Yes.
You would be like, well, okay, you just like move along. But because there's so much poured into what the body represents, that if you're getting your body image wrong, are you getting, what else about you are you getting wrong? Do other people see something in you that you don't?
Yeah. And I think because body image has been something I've done a lot of work through, it has been a real pain point for me. If I was somebody I mean, I don't know, maybe these people exist, Steph, who's always had a comfortable body image and happened to see the difference, would I have immediately been like, oh, that's interesting. Like, I wonder what that's all about, because that's what I might do if, I don't know, I saw something differently that had no emotional attachment for me, because there is emotional attachments that old stuff can be provoked. It's still in there. Those old thoughts, those old neural network pathways can be triggered off. One thing since becoming a therapist and doing this work that really shifted for me quite early on was I used to be the person that made everyone get in the photo. You know, that annoying one? People don't want to be in the photo. And I would be cajoling and push. I couldn't understand why people wouldn't want their photograph taken. And this was even when my body image wasn't great. I still wanted to capture a moment. But I don't think it was until I started working with clients and I really saw the level of distress for some people at just having a camera pointed at them that I've completely stopped them. When someone says they don't want their picture taken, I just back right off. But I wondered if it was worth speaking to that a little bit, because I'm guessing that some of the listeners, even the idea of having a photograph taken, you know, you went and had a photo shoot, I went and got up on a stage, but even the level of fear around doing something like that and the anxiety can be incredibly high for a lot of people.
Yeah, it can be really triggering. And I think some people know that they'll be triggered and don't want to do that. Again, it comes down to that intellectual versus emotional. Like, there's a memory I have of being forced into a photograph. I was with my friends on a beach in Miami, and I was in pants and a sweatshirt because I wouldn't get in a bathing suit. And I was forced in this photo, and my friends were in bikinis. And I still look at that photo and I am triggered. And I don't look at it for that reason, because I mean, also it's in my attic, so I don't look at it for that reason. But I don't want to look at it because I think sometimes you just self-protect. You just know, like, I know what will happen when I look at that. And if you're not prepared to deal with that, right? Maybe now maybe I could, but I couldn't at one time. And I knew that. So it was like, I don't want to look at something that I know is going to trigger my emotional reaction when I have an intellectual okayness with myself right now that feels fine. You know what I mean? Like, I don't need to do that. And I think in the beginning of a recovery process, like, I actually talk to clients about not getting on the scale and not looking in the mirror, and not, especially if someone's used to body checking or like being triggered, and it's like helpful to not. And then the idea is to be able to reintegrate it back in so that we can make peace. But I think if we don't have all the tools to be able to make some kind of peace, then it's worse. You know, it's not gonna be helpful. So I think it's about knowing where you are in that process and working your way up to being able to get through it and to use the whole brain to get through it. But you have to get there first. Otherwise, it's just going to set, it just sets you off, and you don't know what to do with all of that.
I think it's a real challenge for people to be able to say no to being in a photo, because how do you say no without either looking like you're being difficult or without being really vulnerable about not feeling comfortable? It is such a challenging thing. I know people that they go along with it feeling distraught because that feels the lesser of two evils.
Yeah, but I think it depends who you are, because I've had clients who say, you know what, I realized that I was being controlled by this idea that I couldn't be in a picture, like I didn't deserve it and I wasn't going to be part of my kids' memories. And just that thought alone was like, no, I'm not going to do that. And then they get in the picture and it's like very empowering. I think that could sometimes be. So again, it depends on who you are and where you are and what you need. Because other people will be like, I know that, but I don't care. And it doesn't help me to know that, and I think it's so interesting how different it is for different people. It's a tricky subject.
It is. Well, should we see if we can get out of this episode? Don't know how to bring it to a nice, smooth conclusion, but
I wish I could play the jingle and then it would flow more.
Yeah, because we have that afterwards, don't we? So it just sounds a bit.
Maybe it's going right now.
I'm going to put it over the top now.
If you want to connect with the show, you can find us on Instagram at Life After Diets Podcast and email us at lifeafterdietspodcast@gmail.com.